introduce a young artist whose work is beginning to garner the national attention that it so richly deserves. Binh Danh art resonates, not only because he has pioneered innovative and unique techniques in photography, but because his vision is both poignant and timely. Don received his BFA in photography with a minor in Asian American Studies from San Jose State University in 2002. He received his MFA from Stanford University in 2004. His work can be found in the permanent collection of the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the M.H. DeYoung Museum in San Francisco, the Oakland Museum, and the Museum of Contemporary Photography in Chicago, among others. Don's work has been exhibited in a number of important group and solo exhibitions, including Witness to War, Revisiting Vietnam in Contemporary Art at the International Center for the Arts at San Francisco State, the traveling exhibition One Way or Another, Asian American Art Now, and Persistent Vestiges, Drawing from the American-Vietnam War at the Drawing Center in New York. His recent solo exhibition, 1 Week's Dead, at Lightwork in Syracuse forms part of the larger installation that can now be seen in the Clara Hatton Gallery. Given the importance of his voice and his vision, it is no surprise that Don has received numerous fellowships and awards. Most recently, the Visions from the New California Award from the Alliance of Artist Communities, or that his work has received acclaim and applause in the contemporary art press. Binh Danh was born in Vietnam 2 years after the fall of Saigon. His family came to the United States in 1980 as part of the exodus of what is now called the Boat People. This personal history has and continues to inform his work as he explores the trauma of the Vietnam War and its continuing reverberations in our memories. The exhibition featured in our Clara Hatton Gallery in the Visual Arts Building is entitled Life, Times, and Matter of the Swamp. The installation brings together Binh Danh extraordinarily moving chlorophyll prints with found objects from the Vietnam War and from the current conflict in Iraq. As the installation crew unpacked and hung the work last week, the war in Iraq reached its 5-year anniversary, and Don's imagery spoke profoundly to both past and present conflicts and to the inevitable pain and loss that come with war. In an essay on Don's work, Laura Guth writes, quote, Don refrains from politicizing his ideas of the Vietnam War. His work is primarily inspired by a philosophy that human memory is inextricably linked to the Earth's memory. In this context, memory becomes global, rather than having nationalist or other political ideology at its base, end quote. Thus, Don's work, whether images of Vietnamese victims of the war, or Cambodian victims of the killing fields, or in the case of works in the Hatton Gallery, the faces of young Americans who perished 4 decades ago in the swamps of Vietnam, speaks to a shared and ongoing global history of loss. Tim O'Brien, in his great Vietnam War novel, The Things They Carried, writes, quote, stories are for joining the past to the future. Stories are for those late hours in the night when you can't remember how you got from where you were to where you are, end quote. Binh Danh stories in Life, Times, and Matter of the Swamp matter. And I hope that all of you will have the opportunity to spend time with this work in the Hatton Gallery. Again, I'm honored to have the privilege to introduce Binh Danh to you today, so will you please join me in welcoming visiting artist Binh Danh.
Well, thank you, Lenny, for this wonderful introduction. I have to live up to it now. I also want to thank you guys for coming out for this lecture, and special thanks to the people of Fort Collins who made this happen. As an artist, it's always an honor to share my work and practice with others. I'd like to start out with a memory I had as a kid. This is a photo of me taken on my birthday when I was in kindergarten. I remember when I went to school this day, I was a little shy that my classmate was singing the birthday song to me. In my family's tradition, since I was a boy, honoring someone's birthday was not a big deal. I never even remember having a birthday party as a kid, but I do remember the many days of the dead my parents had for my ancestor. Anyway, when recess came along, and I remember as I was sitting there on the playground, I reflect on this special day, the day I was born into this world, and I was thinking, where was I before my birthday, or what was I made of? Is it possible to remember that far back in time? I believe at that moment I had a true awakening myself as a conscious human being. I became aware of time and space. In my work, I ask questions about memories and its physical nature. Do our memories dissolve into the environment like the ways our bodies decompose after we die? What happened to a landscape after being scarred by war? What about the dead, both alien and indigenous? How would they be remembered? After the Vietnam War in 1975, some 800,000 people have left Vietnam by boat. And where they have ended up has often depends on winds and currents. There are many reasons why we were leaving. For my parents, there were political, economic, and social concerns. My parents didn't see their lives fitting into the new regime. Vietnam changed overnight, and the future was in question. Like many Vietnamese my age, our parents wanted to give us a better life. We became refugees. I was too young to remember this experience. These refugees were called boat people. During the escape from Vietnam, boats has become their home, sometimes for weeks, even months. And it's estimated about half of the boat people were children, teenagers like myself at that time. One day, while looking through boxes of old photographs, I found this portrait of my mother as a teenager. I stared at this image for a long time, and after speaking to her about this portrait, she didn't remember exactly how she felt at that time, but she knew she was turning into an adult. The purpose of this portrait was to help find a marriage partner for my mom. The translation on the upper right-hand corner reads, "A lonely person on a boat." Later in college, I realized that the montage of the boat growing out of my mother's head foreshadowed her future. I started searching for documents, family photographs, and stories about my family's journey to the United States. Naturally, my mother became the sea captain of this vessel. She started telling me the story of our sea adventure. I wanted to know why we escaped, how did we survive the sea, and how did we end up in America. It was hard for her to talk about it, but soon the stories poured out of her heart, and history was revealed to me as I dreamt of the time my family and I spent at sea. So again, I'm going to show you a lot of family photographs. On my first trip back to Vietnam in 1999, my grandmother gave me this family portrait taken right before we left Vietnam. And it was amazing for me to see a portrait of my family in Vietnam. And my mother was carrying me there. I was the youngest of 4 kids. And this photograph was actually a photograph that my grandmother held onto as an evidence of us, so she could remember us. And she would tell me these horrific stories where she would have to, to go to these warehouses where a lot of these bodies were washed ashore and try to see if anyone was us, because she didn't know if we survived the journey or not. And it wasn't until we got to the United States that my father sent her a letter, and she got word that we made it that far. And that was already a year and a half later. And this was a document issued by the United States Embassy that allowed us entrance into this country. And our photographs of my family's members are stapled to this document, stating that we are refugees. So as I was looking at this portrait of my mother on this document, I was wondering about what she was feeling. I think this was the happiest day of her life, a one-way ticket to the United States. Also, I was thinking about how photography is used to identify people, is a record of us in the past. So I wanted to take this U.S. Embassy document and make it into an installation. So to play in the idea of using photography as identification, I photographed my family looking straight into the camera. So this is a portrait of my mother about 8 years ago, and nonetheless, it's for me, it's still a recent portrait. And in these photos, we are all wearing white shirts to reference ourselves back to Vietnam. In Vietnamese Buddhist practice, white is also the funeral color. And I want to convey the idea that the South China Sea is a memorial for the hundreds of thousands of boat people who didn't make it, whose bodies are now part of the sea, and in a way honoring their sacrifice and hopefully giving them some form of justice. So the result of this project was artifacts and photographs contrast and installation with a 5-foot origami paper boat. And I apologize, the slide's a little dark here. But in the middle of the picture, you can see this paper boat that was illuminated inside by a light bulb. So as a child, my favorite pastime after a great storm was to release these paper boats down the gutter. And some of them survived the currents of the water while others crashed into the debris. Anyway, the paper boat became a metaphor to my family's journey to the United States. And then on this wall, I presented some of the materials involved in my research. And this is, again, a project I did as an undergrad, but this idea of this collecting artifacts became very second nature to me the way I work today, as those who visit the show that's up right now. And here's another family project that was made soon after we arrived in San Jose, California. And one of the surprising moments in my life was when I placed both of these family portraits side by side. I was amazed by their similarities. It looks like the studio backdrop of the photo taken in Vietnam became the real-life setting of the photo of us taken in the United States. And there was a house on the left and a lake on the right, a fence in the background, and even our stance is the same. So as you can see, the same backdrop is in each photograph. So there is something to say about studio backdrop photographs for the one being photographed. I always find it humorous to see a picture of a person standing in front of an imaginary landscape. But now I just realized, just thinking about it, the photograph is not really for us, the viewer. It's for the person in the photograph. It's for them to be transported in their imagination across distance and time. And the photograph is the true evidence of this longing. So this studio portrait of my family and me foreshadow our future, just like the portrait of my mother. So over the summer of 2002, my mother and I visited a tiny abandoned island off the coast of Malaysia called Pulau Pidang. And it was the site of a Southeast Asian refugee camp where we once lived before coming to the United States. So this is a picture I found online of refugees approaching this island. And this is the doc today. So as a photographer, I want to share with you some of the photographs I made on this trip. This is a portrait of my mom on the beach holding this document that was issued by the United States Embassy. And again, I traveled with my mother, and it was quite amazing to travel with her because she's the one with all the memories, and she'll be telling me stories of life on this island, and she will tell me these stories, but then she will just look past me and into the distance, and I could see, again, how memories is just really coming back to her, just for being on this location again. This was once a boat carrying refugees, and now it's home to hundreds of animals. This is a remnants of the Catholic Church. So again, there's no more refugees on this island. They closed the island in 1990 to stop refugees leaving Southeast Asia. And some of the refugees on the island were also sent back to Vietnam or Cambodia or Laos. So it was very controversial. This is a car poster that I found on one of the walls, and I thought this picture was quite interesting. Again, there's just two posters, and as a documentary photographer, I do not alter the scene, but I was fascinated that there's just two posters, and one of them depicts a car, and the other one depicts a car. The poster is torn apart, and again, it's at this moment you're not sure what type of future you're going to have. Are you going to have this future with this successful, ideas you have in your mind, or you're going to have, another type of future? So everyone on that island was very in limbo. And then also many refugees die on the island and are buried there. So we stumble upon a whole gravesite. And then to pass the time, mythological stories and legends were created. And this was one, this story here was, this monument that was built was dedicated to a spirit figure called Father Be Down, and they named him after the island. So they believed that there was a spirit out there saving these people, dragging them out of the ocean. So I thought that was quite amazing too, that even during this time, during the 80s and 90s, that mythology was created, stories was created about this whole history. And then around this monuments are these plaques. They're family plaques dedicated to this spirit. And then I thought one of the plaques was quite interesting too. It was from a Cambodian family, and it speaks about Thanksgiving. And for me, it conjures up the stories of the pilgrim. Again, one of American first boat people. So again, this history of immigrants and refugees to the United States is actually a very history. It's a history that all of us kind of share. And then one of the most amazing moments on this island for my mother and I was when we stumbled upon this field of ephemeral documents. And these are letters, testimonies, and governmental records. And so again, it's kind of quite amazing how, again, the artifacts kind of come back into the work where I didn't even plan it to come back. So my mother and I tried to collect as much of these documents as we can. And some of them were buried in the dirt with plants growing through them. So here is an example of the documents. Some of the documents we were able to carry off the island. And we knew from a historical context that these letters are very valuable. For example, here I found an ID card belonging to someone, and it reads, Indo-Chinese displaced person. And I wonder if having any form of ID, even one about displacement, makes one feel safe. This is called a boat sheet. And what a boat sheet is a record, is an inventory of the people on a boat after one of these boats is rescued. So a lot of these boats, they just leave Southeast Asia, and then they just linger, they just kind of hang out in the South China Sea until one of the big cargo ships will come by and rescue them. And sometimes they were lucky, other times there was a lot of Thai pirates who robbed these boats, these mainly fishermen, and because they know the people on the boat were carrying their life saving. So on this boat sheet here, somebody wrote there, 22 people died on the sea by Thai. You see in the blue ink. And there was only one survivor, and his name was Tran Chi Chang. And this boat was found on November 3rd, 1986 at 3 a.m. And he was born in 1971, which makes him around 15 years old when they found him. So again, it was these stories that were in the landscape that was quite mind-boggling for me. So I was very drawn to these artifacts, and I was very curious about the information they hold. And I scanned some of these letters and enlarged the part where the paper was decaying. So here a worm ate through the paper, leaving layers of missing information. And I wonder where the information went. It couldn't just disappear. So as a college student, I developed a way of transferring photographic image onto the surface of leaves through photosynthesis, a process I call chlorophyll printing. I printed some of these writing onto leaves, suggesting that these documents imprint themselves into the landscape by sinking into the ground, and the words become the landscape. And here's a detail. And I wanted to say that the information is still there, but transplanted into the biology of the landscape. So just on a technical level, when printing on leaves, I place a negative on top of a live leaf inside a special contact printing frame and place that in the sun for a period of 2 to 4 weeks. And as the chlorophyll is depleted, an image is formed. I then preserve the leaves by casting them in resin like a scientific specimen. So in 1999, I visited Vietnam for the first time, and it was taken by the landscape. Also, it was the first time I met my relatives there. I returned from Vietnam with these photographs, and I'd like to read to you some writings I did on this trip. Vietnam. The Vietnam that I was taught about was a country torn apart by war. I grew up seeing images of monks burning, children being in Nepal, mother running with babies in their arms, bodies being dragged across rice paddy by American GIs, helicopters storming in like locusts, and effigies of Ho Chi Minh burning as my parents took my sister, brother, and me to anti-communism rally. I decided to visit Vietnam to confront these images. I wanted to get away from the Vietnam War. Although remnants of the war linger in the landscape, I try not to photograph it. So this is the path to China Beach. And then when I was there at that time at the War Remnants Museum in Ho Chi Minh City, there was an exhibit up called Requiem, and it was about photographers who were killed during the Vietnam War. So in this installation, there was a light box that has a 35 millimeter camera where the artillery went through the camera and pretty much killed the photographer. So this is a very, also actually this is, just one more slide. This is a rice paddy in a cemetery, and then the Vietnamese people believe that your ancestor will watch over your rice for you. So I thought it was quite amazing to eat the rice where your family members are buried. But when I returned from my first trip to Vietnam, the Vietnam War haunted me for a long time. And being Vietnam, I noticed that so much of the war was still part of the landscape. So I was confronted by the subtle but ubiquitous physical remnants of the war, such as remnants of bomb craters that had been converted into rice paddy. I started a series called Immortality, the Remnants of the American and Vietnam War. I included the American War because in Vietnam they call it the American War, while here we call it the Vietnam War. And I was intrigued with the commonality among the North and South Vietnamese armies, the American soldiers, and the civilians who were caught between the crossfires. I thought, what if the planet could witness these horrific events? What would they remember? What would they record? This body of work deals with an idea I call elemental transmigration, the decomposition and composition of matters into other materials form. This act of war become part of the landscape, and nature remembered the war in the element that composed the landscape. The residue of the Vietnam War are stored in the roots, stems, and leaves. There's a classical law of physics called the conservation of matters, and that is, all matters is composed of atoms of the various elements. The total numbers of atoms in the universe remain constant. That is, you can rearrange the existing atoms in any way you like, but you cannot cause additional atoms to materialize, nor can you cause existing atoms to disappear. This series for me is about the memories of war. All those atoms that compose us, they carry memories that reach back to the beginning of time and have been in many conflicts before the Vietnam War. This piece here is called Shakana, and it was made on March of 2003 during the Shakana campaign over Iraq, although the image is from the Vietnam War. This is a detail here. As you can see, the small little planes flying across this elephant ear leaf. One can also think about the molecule compound of dioxin, an element in the herbicides of Agent Orange. And Agent Orange was used throughout the jungle of South Vietnam to clear out the jungle so the enemy couldn't hide. But they unfortunately, because of the element dioxin in Agent Orange, it caused a lot of devastation for the landscape and the life form in the landscape. So, for example, here's our airplane spraying Agent Orange over the jungles of Vietnam. And the top photo depicts a landscape before Agent Orange was sprayed on, and the bottom photo depicts after the chemical took effect. As you can see, the big change. So the chemical dioxin causes deformation in the offsprings of humans, animals, and plants. And when I was in Vietnam, I visited an orphanage where people affected by dioxin live. Most of them were born with missing limbs, as if they were wounded during the war. But in actuality, the war was born inside of them. These are some photos from a recent trip to Vietnam, which I just returned about 4 days ago. And for about a week, I stayed at the Vietnam Friendship Village, a village that was started by a Vietnam veteran, George Mizo, to house children and adults who were affected by the Vietnam War. So all the residents have serious health problems and believed to caused by Agent Orange. But the kids are the most happiest kids I ever known. I had a great time hanging out with them. So I just want to again show you some of these photographs of these kids. So if you ever find yourself in Hanoi, do visit the Vietnam Friendship Village. And the kids love it when a foreigner comes to visit, and they're always open up for volunteering. So if you're there, just visit a day or two, or even a week, and just hang out with the kids, and they will bring amazing joy to you. This is my friend here. His name is Ty, and he's 14 years old, and he wants to be a doctor. So so this village is housed around 250 children and 100 adults, and they came here to live here about 4 to 5 years, taking classes and hopefully returning back to the village with some survival skills that they learned at this center. So it's very natural for these kids to always give the peace sign when they are being photographed. So I never really asked them why, but I thought that's quite a nice gesture. And so anyway, you could find more about this organization and many other organizations like this on the web. So kind of back to my presentation here. And I found this photo while I was in Vietnam, and it depicts one of the 1,000 of bombs that failed to detonate, and it shows a group of Vietnamese village people who have removed the ammunition from the bomb. While 2 women on the side placed their palms on it, eyes closed in meditation. So I thought that was quite amazing. An object of destruction become an object of meditation. And then again, I want to show you some more photographs I made while I was in Laos. And these are bombs that were dropped on Laos during the Vietnam War. And during the Vietnam War, a soldier put to use some of the most devastating weapons that the war have ever seen. Cluster bombs, which become landmines, chemical bombs, napalm fire bombs, so all type of bombs. There's a lot of experimenting with these bombs, but unfortunately a lot of these bombs didn't explode, and they just land into the landscape, and they become landmines. So according to MAG, which means Mines Advisory Group, an organization that clears landmines throughout the world, they believe that it takes about 400 years to clear all the bombs and mines out of Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. And so these are the 3 countries that was heavily affected by the Vietnam War. So again, these are just all the bombs that were collected. And even every month you will read stories about kids finding cluster bombs, which looks just like soccer balls, and they will think they're balls, and they'll throw them, and they apparently explode, and then danger, unfortunate things happen. And for example, here, this is a bomb crater in Laos. And this, again, this picture I took about a week ago. So this bomb crater was there since the Vietnam War. And so in this area, where it used to be a village, there's all these bomb craters all over the place. Fortunately, all the bombs were removed, so they opened up this area for a tourist, site. And then these are some kids I kind of, stumble upon, So a lot of these bombs become scrap metals, and it's quite interesting how the people of Laos will integrate these materials into their lives. So for example, here, as you can see, there's these bombs, shells are used as stilts, to hold up this house. And then here's a barbecue pit. And of course, here I was just walking. I was finding a garden on a balcony, and then this garden, this pot was once a bomb. So I thought, again, an object of destruction become an object for creation. And then it reminds me of this, this photo taken during anti-Vietnam War protests in front of the Pentagon, where a protester placed a flower into the barrels of these rifles. And again, these rifles were made to kill or seriously hurt someone or transform into flower vases. So while researching the Vietnam War, I came across another dark event in the history of Southeast Asia. In 1975 to 79, almost 2 million Cambodians and ethnic Vietnamese lost their lives to murder and famine when the Khmer Rouge first forced the urban population into the countryside to fulfill their idea of an agrarian society. Those who didn't fit into their society were executed. Many would suggest that the violent backdrop of the Vietnam War encouraged the Khmer Rouge to kill indiscriminately, leaving an estimated of 1,900,000 grave pits across Cambodia. In a secret prison codenamed S-21, once a high school where 17,000 men, women, and children were tortured and killed, their testimony was meticulously documented to justify their execution. Today, this prison is now a genocide museum known as Tulsling. And while visiting this museum, I made many documentation of the interior. This was once a torturing room. And this is one of the survivors of S-21 made this painting. And again, there's only 7 survivors. And even today, this trial of the leaders of the Khmer Rouge is still going on. It's these tribunals take years and years to collect all these evidence. And of course, Tulsling is one of the biggest evidence because the Khmer Rouge was a very, in a way, organized regime. They really typed down everything. They documented everything. And then they also take photographs of the victims after they execute them. And so the feeling I got at Tulsling was so powerful and intense. As part of the victim testimony, the staff of S-21 made photographs of the prisoner. And today, the photographs are displayed at the museum. The images are shocking because it put a face to the victim, and for me, it started to look like people I know. I feel it even looks like relatives and friends. So the portraits at Tulsling are powerful. They have a story to tell, and they're all asking the same question as they peer out to the viewer: how could this happen? And again, these are all young boys and girls. So I wanted to make altars to these victims, a place where the viewer can pray and ask questions of death too. In a way, memorial is a form of justice for the victim. And in this case, most of them are nameless, but like they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Also, I feel like the victims are resurrected in us as we meditate on their portrait. They become us and we become them. There's a sense of compassion. In this piece, I added the image of butterflies into the composition. Butterfly collections always fascinated me. There are almost like photographed, dead and alive at the same time. There's also this killing and preserving that goes into the process of mounting butterflies. On a metaphorical level, the life cycle of a caterpillar into a pupil and then into a butterfly is quite amazing. It's the same creature, but the body changed. And I want to think of our lives in that way. We are this creature of atoms that are constantly set free and captured. So again, here are leaves made to look like butterfly wings. And then these are very small. They range in different sizes. This piece here is called The Story of the Bodhisattva. And what Bodhisattva is a Buddha to be. So this piece reflects the possibility of someone on the path of enlightenment was also put to death. So this whole event was also known as the killing field, where the bodies were buried in mass graves. So the work I have up right now in the gallery is called Lifetimes and Matters of the Swamp. And like the victims of Tulsing, I was captivated with the American portraits in this June 27, 1969 issue of Life magazine titled The Faces of the American Dead in Vietnam, 1 Week's Toll. In this issue, Life magazine published the portraits and names of 242 U.S. soldiers who were killed during the week of May 28 to June 3, 1969 in the Vietnam War. And these images are hunting, like the image of Tulsing, and they're an image of dead people. And I want to say that photography is so related to death, too, because the moment you take a photograph of someone or something, a minute later, that person or the landscape no longer exists. Everything changed, even elementally. Physically, we are never the same person. Our bodies are constantly changing. And at least on this planet, you cannot freeze time. Even a photograph will fade. And when you try to preserve something, you're pointing out that it won't last. And to photograph it is to remember it. And photographs are like the DNAs of our memories. Christian Boltanski, an artist, said, "You die twice. You die when you die a second time when someone picks up your photo and no one knows who you are." So when someone dies, we remember the photographs of that person, but not that person. So I've always been interested in imagining what that image would be. What would that image that remains? So by the time of the American Civil War, photography was widely used. Soldiers would carry photographs of their loved ones with them. And also, just in case if a soldier was badly wounded and on the verge of dying, he could take these photographs out and spread them on the ground so he could see his family member before he died. In a way, giving himself a proper death, a good death. So in some cases, his comrades would carry these photos back to his family so they can also be at rest, knowing that he died with them around. So again, I thought it was quite interesting how photography is even used in the beginning of the American Civil War. Was pretty much when photography was invented in 1839. This fact that I just gave you, I had to give a footnote, is from Drew Gippel's book. I forgot the title now. It's called, it'll come back to me. Do anyone know that book? Drew Gippel. It's called, it's something about death, but it's related to the American Civil War, where the first time that, American really experienced death outside the house, people were dying in the battlefield. So anyway, it's a quite amazing book. So this is an installation of this body of work I did. So I wanted to take this series a little further, and while pondering about what this work means to me, I had the memories of the time when I was a kid watching the movie The Swamp Thing. So I followed my intuition and started to collect and research this comic book superhero and was amazed about the similarities between The Swamp Thing and the 1 Week's Dead Life magazine. The Swamp Thing started out as a comic book and was made into a movie and TV series. There are lots of variation of story, but the start of the story goes like this. A scientist named Dr. Alex Holland and his wife Linda were working for the government in Louisiana. One day on the way back to their lab, Dr. Holland was attacked and beaten. After he woke up, he discovered a bomb planted underneath their researching area. The bomb exploded, covering him with this formula he invented, and he was set on fire. He ran outside and fell into the swamp. Days later, a hideous, man-like plant monster emerged out of the water and became known as the Swamp Thing. So he went back to the lab and found his wife Linda dead. So throughout the comic book, the Swamp Thing has had these flashbacks of the time he was with his wife, and he couldn't explain these visions. It was not until later he realized that he isn't that Dr. Alex Holland anymore. The real Dr. Alex Holland was killed in the original lab accident. Holland was dead before he fell into the swamp water. His corpse decomposed and was ingested by the plant life, which absorbed the formula and grew a human-like form, not realizing that they weren't alive in a human sense. It mimics Holland's body in plant form and believed itself to be him, having his thoughts and memories. So I thought just on that metaphorical level, I thought it was quite interesting to apply that mythology onto, American soldiers in the Vietnam War. So just looking at the material I collected, I was again fascinated by the similarity. Here are comic books that started to look like the 1 Week's Dead layout. So I found 16 more issues of the same Life magazine and made a large collage of them looking like the Swamp Thing cover. I did the same thing for the Swamp Thing cover. I found 18 more issues of this comic book issue and made a collage to spell out the word life. Even the action figures dated back to the Vietnam War. Here's Brian Jack, a Vietnam veteran, and Weed Killer. He's wearing this orange uniform, which hauntedly has a connection to Agent Orange. Of course, this is Swamp Thing. So I made these prints by placing the action figure on a scanner and just making direct scan of them. And then this is a large Swamp Thing, which is also a piece you can see in the gallery. So included in this body of work are also found photographs of U.S. Marines from the Vietnam War era. One photograph depicts a Marine in a transcendental state. This photograph captured my feeling for this work, the passing of time and the preservation of memories inside and outside of the body. And also a photo like this one taken by Larry Barrows of 4 Marines recovering a comrade under fire, dragging the wounded body across a field of grass, had a big impression on me. So I decided to give printing on grass a try. I was wondering about the imprint of the body on the grass as the grass blade embodies himself into the body, and how the contact is exchange of memories. And then for me, there's something scary about camouflage patterns. I actually don't like it when people wear camouflage uniforms or camouflage patterns. Obviously it's for a fashion statement, but then for me, there's always this military aggression in them. So in this uniform here, I found in Vietnam. I thought it was quite, when soldiers go to war, they wear this uniform, this camouflage uniform. And somehow they already become part of the landscape. They camouflage themselves into the landscape. And there's, a large possibility that they might not be able to walk out of the landscape. So I was amazed on this uniform here that someone, the designer, dropped a bamboo leaf into the pattern. I never understand why. I had to do some more research on this pattern. But this was, again, a North Vietnamese uniform. And then here's a camouflaging leaf. So, I was wondering, what if we all wear camouflage uniforms, if everyone could wear camouflage uniforms, how the possibility that the nature will start to evolve towards the way, they see us. So Who knows? And then on June 1st of 2007, the New York Times published around 750 photos of the dead American soldier from the start of the Iraq War. And they call this roster of the dead. So again, this idea is, is connected to the Life magazine. I also found this night vision footage on a military website of soldier practicing for the war. And I thought the greenness of the night vision is quite amazing. It makes me wonder if these soldiers will become like the swamp, And I don't imagine the landscape of the Middle East as green and slush as this image, as this perspective from the night vision. But then it makes you wonder, has the war has the Vietnam War becomes the Iraq War? Has the war itself just moved to a new location? And it seems like we're always fighting this war that we still don't quite understand. Again, fighting this evil, this evil of communism or evil of terrorism. That is this concept, fighting this concept, So I thought that's always a question, as American that we should always ask ourselves. This next series I want to show you is called IKEA Made in Vietnam. And I heard there's going to be an IKEA store opening up soon in Fort Collins or something like that. Some of you might be excited about that. But anyway, I read on the blog on the internet, there's like all these conversations about this IKEA coming. But one day when I was visiting IKEA, I noticed that some of the IKEA products were made in Vietnam. So I decided to buy these products and arrange them in installation to suggest they're persistent memories to the Vietnam War. So IKEA products are designed in Sweden, but manufactured in developing countries such as Vietnam. And IKEA stores are never located in the countries where the products are made. It all started when I picked up this IKEA shopping bag, and I thought it was funny that it looked like a boat. I was then surprised that it was made in Vietnam. So here again are vases that are arranged to look like bombs, and that's again a placemat, and all those again products are from Vietnam. Here's a detail. This is a laundry hamper, and it's titled Sack of Migration. This is probably one of my most Duchamp pieces I ever made. I just placed this piece on a pedestal, and when you place something on a pedestal, the whole contents of it changed. But again, anyway, I was thinking about what people have to do when they have to leave a country. They have to kind of pack up and leave, and then pack up their belongings. I found this scale model of a Huey helicopter and placed it on this grass placemat. The helicopter is definitely not from the IKEA store, but the placemat is. Again, suggesting that pattern, the pattern of the helicopter, the wind that it create, onto the landscape. So I made digital prints of the IKEA products and arranged them into an altar. And even these candles are made in Vietnam, and I was interested in their colors, which are the colors of the North and South Vietnamese flags during the war. And again, the North and South war, it was a civil war and they were fighting each other. So I replaced the label and placed the flag onto the box. And the Buddha, not from the IKEA store, was sitting on an IKEA basket that was turned on its head. And the decoration on the outside of the basket suggests the many boats and lives that were lost during the second waves of refugees leaving Southeast Asia. So I have another short series to show you. And I wanted to start out with a sound piece by the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. And Thich Nhat Hanh is a meditation master, a scholar, and a poet, and an activist. He was born in central Vietnam in the mid-1920s and became a monk at the age of 16. In 1966, he toured the United States to speak against the Vietnam War and was nominated by Martin Luther King Jr. for a Nobel Peace Prize. In 1967, he was exiled from Vietnam and now resides in France.
What you are looking for, like happiness, peace, joy, They are all in the present moment. The Pure Land of the Buddhist must be found in the present moment. The kingdom of heaven of the Catholics, of the Protestants, should also be found in the present moment. Look at the tree. It's a wonderful thing, a tree. A tree is very beautiful. A tree to me is as beautiful as a cathedral, even more beautiful. I looked into the tree and I saw the whole cosmos in it. I saw the sunshine in the tree. Can you see the sunshine in the tree? Yeah, because without the sunshine, no tree can grow. I see a cloud in the tree. Can you see? Without a cloud, there can be no rain, no tree. I see the earth in the tree. I see everything in the tree. So the tree is where everything in the cosmos come into. And the cosmos reveal itself to me to a tree. Therefore, a tree to me is a cathedral. And I can take refuge in the tree, and I can get nourished by the tree.
So that's Thich Nhat Hanh. So this is a series I call Searching for the Cosmo. And ever since I was a child, I was in love with the Cosmo. When I look at the sky at night, I always imagine my life out there, not bound to this planet. Thich Nhat Hanh once said, "You are only made of non-you elements." That is, we are composed entirely of non-body elements such as hydrogens, oxygens, carbon, iron, stars, dust, and leaves. So in Buddhism, there's a vast cosmetic energy which pulsates throughout every living thing. And the birth of an individual is not the first creation of life, but the continuation of one that has always existed and will continue to exist. And I think just a simple concept makes our lives more meaningful. This piece here is called Partial Eclipse of Nasturtium. So stars are very special. When we look up at night, pretty much is what we see. And stars are like human beings. I mean, they are born, live out their lives, and die sometime in great explosion called supernova. And after they spew all their matters throughout space, new stars are born. This is the last piece I'm going to show you. This is a self-portrait. So I want to end my talk today by a quote by the cultural theorist Bell Hooks. And she said, "Our struggle is a struggle of memory against forgetting." In my assessment of this quote, we have to remember the past, both light and dark, even down to its elemental particles. So thank you.